They cut off my air conditioning, so I shut down their neighborhood's cooling. It happened right when the heat wave hit. One evening I came home and the house felt wrong. The usual hum of the AC was gone. The air inside was thick and warm. The kids were sticky and tired from the heat. Even the dog lay flat on the floor without moving. I called the HVAC company first. They checked the unit and told me the supply had been shut off at the street. No breaker tripped, no blown fuse. Someone had turned off the main feed. I assumed it was a city issue until I saw a laminated notice taped to the meter. It said my connection was cut for unauthorized equipment. Unauthorized for what? My AC had been there for years. My family had lived with it for summers, before the HOA existed. I called the HOA office to ask what was going on. They told me my unit violated new community standards. They insisted I remove the outdoor condenser or face fines. When I asked for paperwork, they gave me a vague policy email and a smug answer. No exceptions, the president said. At first I tried to cooperate. I spent the night with fans and wet towels. I bought ice for the kids. We slept on the living room floor near the one shady window. Neighbors offered sympathy but not help. Hours turned into days. My children were restless and exhausted. They could not concentrate on homework. My elderly neighbor across the street had to go to the clinic for heat exhaustion. The neighborhood Facebook filled with angry posts and comments. The HOA did not move. Instead, they sent daily fines for non-compliance because I refused to remove the unit before I had time to find a replacement. They called it enforcement. To me, it felt like punishment. I started to investigate. I pulled the original subdivision maps from the county office. I read the old easements and utility agreements. What I found surprised me. The main cooling loop that supplied several streets ran under a strip of land tied to my property by an old utility easement. It was a relic from when the developer first laid pipes and conduits decades ago. That was the opening I needed. It was a legal fact the HOA had overlooked. It meant the primary control valve for a large branch of the cooling supply physically crossed my land. They needed my permission for work that affected that segment. I called my lawyer and explained the situation. We sent a formal notice revoking any implicit permission for maintenance or upgrades on that easement until a legal agreement was signed. We then notified the utility contractor that any work on the section passing through my property required written consent. By the next morning, crews arrived at the HOA area to check the lines. They were told to stand down until the issue was resolved. The HOA president rushed to the utility company and demanded immediate service, but the company told him they could not risk liability without permission. With my revocation in place, the technicians could not touch the valves that fed the subdivision's secondary cooling loops. Within hours, air handlers began shutting down in wave after wave. Condenser motors clicked off. Cooling towers slowed. Homes that had relied on the shared feed felt the temperature climb by the hour. There were no dramatic explosions or games of cat and mouse, just a slow, cruel rise in heat. People opened doors and windows and hoped for a breeze. Fans whirred uselessly. Children lay in the bathtubs with cold water poured over them. Neighbors wore wet shirts to try to stay comfortable. Meanwhile, my house stayed livable because I had a backup plan. Years earlier, after one bad summer, I had installed a private, standalone cooling unit with its own supply and an independent compressor. It ran on a different feed and had automatic battery backup. My kids could sleep in cool rooms. My elderly mother had a quiet room where she could sit without risk. The contrast was immediate and humiliating for the HOA. Where their members once bragged about their manicured lawns and perfect houses, now they sat on stoops wiping sweat from their brows. The president and the board members who had cheered on enforcement found themselves pacing in front of their own houses, pleading with the utility crews. They called me the first night and asked me to restore access. Their tone was different now. No smugness, just urgency. "Please," the president said, "we will sign anything. We will reverse the fines." I told them I would consider a settlement. I asked them to cover the cost of every doctor visit and cooling aid my family and neighbors had needed. I asked for compensation for the nights of lost sleep and the spoiled food from warm refrigerators. And I demanded a written agreement that future actions affecting shared utilities required my explicit written permission. They agreed. They wrote checks. They signed the contract. They apologized in public meetings. But I did not stop there. I insisted the HOA fund and pay for a community cooling plan that would benefit everyone, including portable stations for the elderly during heat waves. They had to host heat safety workshops and improve their rules so they could not selectively target one house again. Today my house remains cool. My kids sleep through the night. My neighbors have a new respect for what they once dismissed. The HOA learned that a single policy can come back to cost more than they ever imagined. I never wanted to be cruel. I only wanted to protect my family and teach them that rights have value. So tell me, if you had been in my place, would you have cut their cooling?